let's talk about horror movies that have come out this year.
Yeah.
Our favorites and least favorites, and then some ones that are coming up, because maybe the folks watching the podcast here don't know, but you cover a lot of film festivals for us, a lot of primarily genre film festivals.
Exactly.
And you're connected with a lot of filmmakers.
Yeah.
So you see a lot of the horror stuff that's coming up before anyone else, general
Yeah.
audiences, get to see it.
And it really feels like there's a real horror community is built up out of these festivals of filmmakers that are collaborating with each other,
Yeah.
Working with each other, helping each other out. I think it's a really good time for actually quite smart, independent horror films. I think we're in a really good place.
Why do you think it is that horror? Because I've noticed this in the past, even amongst, for the most part, amongst horror websites, horror fan sites. Why do you think it is the horror community seems to kind of circle the wagons for each other in a way that other filmmakers don't? It seems like there's more of a brotherhood mentality.
Yeah,
there,
I don't know what it is. It feels to me like a lot of the creators in that industry try not to separate themselves from the fans.
Yeah.
We're all in it together. There's no VIP rooms at these festivals. You can just hang out, talk to the filmmakers afterwards. And it's not the same when you go to like art house festival like a Cannes or something. That's never going to happen.
Yeah.
So I feel like it's quite nice. It's like everyone feels like they're all pulling together.
Yeah.
And as a couple of guys have said to me, like there's not as much competition because they see that if your horror film succeeds, then mine's got a better chance of getting a bigger release and succeeding. So rather than wishing ill on each other, they're kind of pulling for each other because it's good for the whole industry if it's
reminds me a bit
making
of
some money.
Theater in a way, like the way that I can't speak to this too much, but like that theater, you're kind of all in it together. Like, you got to be more of a scrappy upstart, and you have to kind of do it yourself, and you need to get word of mouth out there, and it doesn't help anybody if one of them fails because that will roll back at you.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the horror movies we've seen this year that we liked. Let's start with you because you have more of them committed to memory.
I do, but I think you've seen a few of these. So I think the one that stands out this year has been It Follows.
Mm-hmm, I agree.
Such an interesting, smart, original film. It did divide some people, I think, because it is slow.
Well, Tarantino has pointed out some of the mythology problems with the movie that I think have that last stretch when they're in the pool and stuff. I think I can see the criticisms of that, but I think it's a damn good movie.
And it's frightening.
Yeah, it's great. It's a great concept.
Yeah, and Micah Monroe, I think she's a really interesting up-and-coming actress. She also did The Guest last year.
She sat right in that chair. Or maybe she sat in this chair. Either way, she sat right here.
Well, she's great. She's awesome. Great in The Guest. Did you see The Guest? I mean,
yes.
That was last year, but that's phenomenal.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's probably the standout horror film that's come out so far this year. But another one that's been good is The Visit.
I still haven't seen it.
That was just a nice surprise because M. Night, his last couple of films weren't for me, maybe weren't for you.
No, were pretty terrible. Evidently not for anybody, yeah.
So he's gone back to what he knows. He's gone with Jason Blum's production company, made a low-budget horror film, super low budget.
But it's funny too.
No stars, and it's funny, and it's damn frightening, and it was a big hit, and I think he's just announced he's going to do another scary movie next. So I think
it's called Split. James McAvoy. Yeah.
So I think he's back in his niche now, M. Night, having kind of experimented with some other things. I think he's going to stay on solid ground.
And he's had some success with Wayward Pines on television over here. So
yeah,
it's nice to see a guy kind of get their footing back, and especially like I do feel like he was pretty arrogant. We all read those interviews and remember didn't he do the fake documentary about him or whatever? What was that nonsense a few years ago? And so he has, and unfortunately this is Hollywood, so you have to get humbled, and then they build you back up, and it's it's just.
I'm a big fan of his. I'm really glad that I can get passionate about one of his movies again.
Yeah.
And then a film I'm really passionate about, which I don't think's come out in the UK, and I think over here it might be out on VOD already. Deathgasm.
I've heard of it. I have not seen that one.
I cannot recommend this highly enough, especially if you're looking for something fun to watch on Halloween. It's got a real Shaun of the Dead, Evil Dead 2 vibe. It's very funny, it's very silly. It's about these teenage kids in New Zealand who are kind of losers, and they're in a terrible rock band, and then they find a record and play it backwards, and they summon a demon, and then they've got to save the world by destroying this demon. And it's really, really funny. But the effects as well are absolutely top notch. Really? I think maybe the director worked at Weta.
Oh,
but it's one of these films where, a bit like Black Sheep a few years ago, where it's a funny, silly film, but they've actually really nailed it with the effects. So
speaking of New Zealand, in Evil Dead, I have to say, last night I saw Ash versus Evil Dead.
Yeah.
There was a premiere, and they showed the first episode. It's great. It's so much fun. And Sam Raimi directed it. He's not. I don't think he's directing every episode, but it was exactly what you would kind of hoped and expected. You know, is it perfect? No, but it's fun, and it's as dumb and goofy as you would hope.
Is it gory?
Yeah, but like ridiculous gore, you know, exactly what you want. Like somebody gets half their head shot off, but they're still going, you know, and that kind of thing. Yeah, so it's just, it's good. I'm looking forward to, and it's already been renewed for a second season.
Yeah.
So Starz clearly likes what they've seen.
Yeah.
Okay, some other, what horror movies have come out this year that didn't work for you?
I didn't make a note of any of them.
I'm going to come out and say Poltergeist reboot.
Okay, so I didn't watch it.
You didn't miss it.
Yeah.
And I like Gil Keane. I like that director.
And Sam Rockwell's a great actor.
Great. Yeah, and oh God, her name went right out of my head, the one who plays his wife. But yeah, it's a great cast, but it speaks to the fact that like horror remakes largely aren't good. You know, there's been a few ones that worked. Like I know Carl is a big fan of the Friday the 13th remake from like what, 2009?
Yeah, Dawn of the Dead was good.
Yeah, there's Snyder Dawn of the Dead. But like this it reminded me, not as bad, but like a little bit of the Omen remake where you're being faithful to the gist of the original movie and you have good actors, but there's something tone deaf. There's something bloodless about it, you know?
Yeah. One that maybe I get a sense we're disagreeing on is Insidious 3.
Yeah.
Because I liked Insidious 3 and you didn't.
I didn't really care.
Why didn't you like?
It was, there were moments that I liked the father-daughter stuff, but I felt like it was a movie that was, I didn't like the, kind of just the cheesiness of it. Although the man who can't breathe, or what they call it?
Yeah, I can't remember.
Yeah, I like the idea of that villain and sort of the aesthetic of it. Yeah, it was okay. I just wasn't nuts about it. I thought it was a little too, like, especially at the end, because it's a prequel. It's like Lin Shaye's like, "Come on, boys, let's go."
See, I really like that. I really like that. I think those characters are great. And we've spoken to the writer and the director, Lee Winnell, who plays one of those characters, Specs, and he said that if they do a fourth one, it'll definitely follow on from that moment where it's a film that's literally about them finally, rather than them coming in to save the day at the end.
Right, right.
And I think I'd like to spend more time with those characters. I think they're really fun. I think she's amazing.
Yeah,
and they turned her into like a kick-ass heroine in this one.
And she's a very sweet lady. I don't know if you've ever
I've never met
to meet
her.
She's really nice.
I'd love to
Really
meet
cool,
her.
Yeah. She's very cool. Any other horror movies coming up that we should keep an eye out for?
Well, one last one I was going to mention that's out is We Are Still Here, which is a great little ghost story by Ted Geoghegan, who is a publicist that we've dealt with.
Oh yeah,
and he's directed a movie, and it's really effective.
Yeah,
it's slow, but it gets there, and the last half hour is crazy.
You know, it's funny. That's the second publicist I knew who has now become a film director. The other one was Justin Simeon. He used to work at Sony, and he made Dear White People last year. And I got a card in the mail from Spirit Awards, and he's on the cover with an award.
Amazing.
And so I'm like, dude, you're in my mailbox.
Yeah.
He's like, I think it's so funny. He used to be, Justin used to be the guy sitting in the hallway at the junkets checking people in.
Good for him.
And yeah, it's astounding. So it can be done, people. Can be
done.
And
I'll recommend 3 for next year, just to get on people's radars. There's a film called The Devil's Candy, which is a really good fun. It's not
like, about the making of bonfires of the vanities.
No, it's not.
I would love to see that one.
It's a bit like Deathgasm, actually. It's about like a haunted house, and it's set in Texas, and like it's the guy who's in the house, the dad of the family, he's a guitar playing artist, and but so I'm not selling this one very well right now. But again, there's like an evil spirit, and it's a real rock and roll horror film. It's funny, but it's also like really exciting. And
so I'm seeing a through line here. You like haunted house movies or evil spirit movies?
This is just what I'm seeing.
Oh, okay.
I'll give you one that isn't. The Witch.
Okay, this one I've been hearing about. I love any movie that's a period film.
Yeah.
And particularly, basically old New England, like colonial New England.
It's set in New England about 40 years before the witch trials.
Yeah.
So it's kind of in a time when you can see this building and this fear in these people. And it's a people who believe the Bible, but also they're not very well educated. They believe fairy stories and fairy tales, and all this stuff gets mixed up in their brains. So they start.
And they live out in the woods.
They live.
Right?
Yeah,
so
this is a family that's
going to play on your.
It's a family that's cut off, and actually the main guy is Chris Finch from the British Office. So I smiled the first time he was on screen, but then I didn't smile again because he's very good. The language is very old-fashioned language.
Oh, nice.
So it's all, you know, you really have to take time to let your ear.
That's a ballsy horror movie. I love that.
It's more an art house film than like a horror film.
That trailer is online. We have it. It's fantastic. Check it out.
It's a very, very beautifully made film, and it stays with you. The ending stays with you for a long time. So that one's really good. And then this one, the final one, it's more maybe a thriller, but it's very violent when it's violent. So I'm putting in, and that's Green Room, which has Patrick Stewart in, and it's kind of about, it's basically punks versus Nazis. It's like an old John Carpenter film with this punk band that you quite like, getting trapped by these Nazis who are trying to kill them, and they've got to try and escape. And so it's like a siege. It's a siege movie, really.
I gotta see that.
But it's so well put together.
It's Green Room. So,
yeah.
All right. Oddly enough, opening up this weekend is could say Scouts versus Zombies, but the actual title is Scout's Guide to the Zombie Apocalypse.
Yep.
You did mention a little bit about horror comedies. I find like that's a really tough thing to pull off.
Yep.
What from the number of ones that you've seen, what does it take to pull off a horror comedy?
Oh, that's a good question.
If
I knew I'd be making them.
I mean, I feel like it's even some of the best filmmakers can't recapture that. Like,
it's someone that
Landis
really, you've got to really understand the horror genre, I think.
Yeah.
You can't just come in with a comedy director.
Yeah.
And get them to do a good horror comedy. I think it needs to be a horror director who has a good sense of comic timing. Yeah.
Do you
like Edgar Wright? Yeah, like
so
Edgar Wright, like Sam Raimi.
Yeah.
Landis, though, he did it with American Werewolf.
Yeah. Which to me is still the best horror comedy.
Yeah, I think you just, and then there's examples that contradict that. I think I did Zombieland, hadn't done a horror film, but if you've got to understand a horror film.
James Gunn understood it because he did all the trauma stuff when he did Slither. So.
And so when it's nasty, it's got to be nasty and scary, and all those films have that. It can't be half-hearted.
Yeah,
yeah. You know, it can't be like almost like a spoof.
And because I think in a way they seem to forget the ones that don't work. That you're not making fun of the horror. Yeah. You're making fun of your reaction to the horror. The horror has to be horrific, but titillating too in its own way.
They seem to be good at it in New Zealand as well, because the best one I saw last year was a movie called Housebound. And it's really frightening.
I think that's on Netflix. If you
it's fantastic, and that's a perfect Halloween one. It's really frightening, but man, it's funny when it's funny, and then and it's in that Peter Jackson universe that Black Sheep was and Deathgasm is. So, and What We Do in the Shadows was quite a good one, although that was more funny than scary. But.
Director now doing Thor Ragnarok.
Yeah.